Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi. Well, I know how it is. It's in the afternoon on the last day of the conference. It's hard to concentrate. It's been like that for me for the last 2 months. Most of that time I've spent in Taiwan to adopt a baby, and recently came back. The whole family is jet-lagged, but I made it back to NDC. Same date, same room as last year. So, my name is Halvor Sakshaug. I'm the application security lead at Confirmit here in Oslo. And I'm going to talk about making a company HTTPS only when it's difficult. Because, as you may know, the web is getting encrypted, and we should really get the padlock everywhere. And at Confirmit, we may get it just in time before Google Chrome says that HTTPS is the norm, and they start removing the padlock. Did I say padlock? Mozilla user group studies found that a lot of users think that this is the handbag. It's found on all the shopping sites, after all. So I work for Confirmit, and we're best known for our surveys, because that's kind of the core of our business. So if you need not just a survey, but maybe have some further requirements than just a survey, you may likely come to us. And people use our software for market research and for customer satisfaction surveys and for voice of the customer, like customer feedback. They don't just do the surveys, they also analyze and report on data. You may not have heard about us. We're not that well known, but we have 10 million page loads of surveys every day. So I started in Confirmit back in 2012 as a developer. But then I got more and more into security. And while I got into security, I thought that having all these HTTP connections is not good. We should do something about that. And I know that other people also thought the same thing, but we also knew it was hard. One of the reasons we knew we shouldn't have them was because a few years before this, Firesheep had come out, which was really a way to show how you could hijack sessions when people are on HTTP on open Wi-Fi. So I really wanted to have us HTTPS only, and I don't know if you know who this guy is. It's Cato the Elder from the Roman Senate back in 2nd century BC. He was the guy who ended all his talks with, he said that, I believe that Carthago should be destroyed. And I wasn't on the same level, but quite often I would sneak in that, and we should do something about our HTTP connections, just to feed it in, tell people all the time that, well, this is not good, we should really do something about it. Oops, the stage is ending. So, HTTPS. It's just about adding the S, of course. The S stands for secure, and as always, security comes last. And security is added later. For most websites, to add the S means you get a certificate, you set up a redirect, and then you fix some references. For us, it was a lot more, because we had given our customers a lot of freedom. Freedom to design things just the way they wanted. And now we would have to take some of that freedom away and be a lot more restrictive. Also, others have faced a lot of issues when moving to HTTPS only. One of them is Stack Overflow. And here I'm referring to almost 12,000-word blog post on all the things that Stack Overflow had to do. It's quite a lot of things. And what's interesting is that there is hardly any overlap what we had to do. So if you really think that this is something we need to do, and you look for other people who have been through the same toils, well, I give you some things here, and Stack Overflow has a lot more. So this is what I'll be talking about. First, some introduction to HTTPS and SSL and TLS and all these things. And then I'll just explain mixed content, in case somebody doesn't know what that is. Then I'll talk about the problems we had to fix. And the first one was loads of mixed content in our customer documents. And then custom domains and web services. and then back to more mixed content, but in some other places that needed some other solutions. And the common factor in what we had to do is that we couldn't do everything. Because in all of these, our customers had to do something before we would be ready. And if they didn't do it, well, things might start breaking for them. And we want to make it easy for our customers. Okay, so why do we want HTTPS? I guess we all know that HTTPS gives encryption. And with encryption, we have confidentiality, so nobody can see what's being communicated. But we also get integrity, which means people can't inject evil script or an ad into a page. Contrary to what a lot of people believe, we actually get performance. Some people have beliefs from maybe 10 or 15 years ago that HTTPS will slow things down. That's no longer true. Now you can get HTTP2 only over HTTPS, and that has a lot of performance improvements. You can also get broadly compression, which will reduce bandwidth, which will also speed things up. Google says that they have improved search ranking for sites on HTTPS. And then there are some features that are blocked on HTTP in Firefox and Chrome. There are things like geolocation, device orientation, microphone, and video, because they can be sensitive. And a lot of our customers running surveys want to enable some of these, and for them it's a good thing to have everything on HTTPS, so they're not suddenly losing out some input from some other respondents. So, what's not to like about this? Everyone should have it, and we're seeing a push towards more and more use of HTTPS. And actually now we see around 75% of all page loads on the internet are HTTPS, while the others are HTTP. And there's been a push towards it. So a few years ago, we got Let's Encrypt. It's a certificate authority, or CA, that gives you certificates for free. But not only that, you can also automate the process of getting certificates. And without Let's Encrypt, well, you'll have to go to a commercial CA and buy a certificate and install it. And before it expires, you'll have to do the same thing again. So it costs money, and it's a lot of hassle. And also, the browsers have started to discourage the use of HTTP. So we're seeing like small steps towards this. First with the password and credit card fields, then with all text fields. And next month, Google Chrome will mark all HTTP connections as not secure. And then they will have a few more steps towards the end of this year. So when we are talking about HTTPS, some people will also say SSL and some will say TLS. And what are these things? I'll try to define it. It's always dangerous to define because then people will say that you're not correct, especially if you go hold your talk at a university. I tried that and I was instantly corrected by like the guy who wrote the Wikipedia article on the subject. So HTTPS is not a protocol, it's the scheme. The protocols are called SSL and TLS with different version numbers. So a lot of people will say SSL. Well, we aren't really using SSL anymore because all the SSL algorithms are now seen as very insecure and we should no longer use them. So we're actually only using TLS, or at least that's what we should be doing. And we should also be phasing out the early TLS versions because they're also becoming dangerous. A lot of flaws have been found in them, some of them mitigated. And then also when we configure a site to have HTTPS, we don't only configure the protocols, we'll also have to configure ciphers. And here are some cipher names I found. They are picked at random. They're quite descriptive, but maybe not very friendly. And even though your code may get old and still work, these things are something that should be maintained because these things have a lifetime. They will become weak and insecure with time. So I dotted TLS 1.0 and 1.1 because those should be phased out, and that's happening. So there's a few websites that have already phased it out, and some others that have announced it. Maybe the least known here is the most important one, PCI. End of this month, payment card industry says that if you want to have your credit card payments to be compliant with PCI standard, you will have to phase out TLS 1.0. Otherwise, if there is fraud with credit cards on your site, you'll probably have to bear the cost of it. And this is also what we have to, or we want to do at Confirmit. So we want to move everyone over to HTTPS, but then we want to restrict HTTPS slightly. And you may ask, who is really using TLS 1.0 and 1.1? Nobody is really using 1.1, because there are no clients that I've heard of, at least, that have 1.1 as the best protocol. They're either at 1.0 or 1.2. But the one that has 1.0 as their best is Windows XP. And as we all know, Windows XP is dead, or it's at life support, or somebody is trying to keep it alive. And if you're running Windows XP, your best TLS protocol, as I said, is 1.0, unless you're using Firefox, which has its own implementation. The best cipher suit is considered weak, and you don't have SNI, server name indication. So quite soon, you can't pay with credit cards. You can't visit a lot of sites. And a lot of other sites won't work because they use SNI, like all the free Cloudflare sites have SNI, and a lot of other sites. So the web is breaking down for Windows XP, and, well, it's broken down already. But I looked in our logs to see who's using Windows XP. And it turned out that a lot of people are still using Windows XP and some other old operating systems. And I found some surveys that had 30% Windows XP users. And I even found another one that had 60. And these were, of course, in China. I found some others with 3 to 5% of Windows XP, and they were in Italy. And I found another one with 22%. That was an employee satisfaction survey targeted at one corporation. And as we all know, after WannaCry last year, hospitals were also in there. They use Windows XP. And we have to be patient with hospitals because, well, they have often 10,000 different types of equipment with a lifespan of 30 years. So Windows XP is still young. I think there were even banks in there. We talked to some banks a few years ago, and they were like, they had these really strict security requirements, one after another. Then they had a different requirement in the end. And then you need to support Windows XP. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but okay. The last one, with a lot of Windows XP, about 5%, was holiday resort. I guess people were tired of being in the sun or swimming pool, and then they went inside for the shade, and they found a resort computer, and what else do you do on your vacation than to answer the resort survey? Of course, at Confirmit, we say thank you for the business. So, at Confirmit, we were using HTTPS, but we also had HTTP connections. We always used HTTPS when a password was involved. I say always, at least long before our time. Confirmit was founded way back in the time when the first SSL protocols came out, so it probably wasn't SSL or HTTPS back then. But it was in good shape for like the really sensitive stuff. Some of our apps only used HTTPS, others were mixed. And of course, that added some complexity when you go between apps. You have one that's only using HTTPS, and some others where the user shouldn't be on HTTPS, and then you have to remember when going back and forth. And users could opt in to be HTTPS only. They could do this on a site level. So some of our customers, with their own installation, they will turn their site to be HTTPS only. Some companies running on our shared environment would opt in to be HTTPS only because they cared about security. Some groups of users would be HTTPS only. Some users would opt in individually. And you could also turn it on for surveys. And as developers, just start thinking about the complexity. And then you add about 7 other settings for SSL, and it starts to get interesting. And I really look forward to cleaning it up. And it's also got to be simpler, like in the whole development cycle, because we have to fix this for, or set up HTTPS only for development computers on the test servers and the build servers, and having only one configuration will make it a lot easier. But if we just switched everything to HTTPS, what would break? The first thing that would break, we knew about, was mixed content in client-generated documents. We didn't know how much, but we feared that it was quite a bit. And we could just do samples and see if it was there, or we knew about some of it, but we couldn't really change it because it's our customers' documents. It's not ours. We can't go in and tamper with it. And you also knew that some of this content isn't even on our servers, so it's even harder to do something about it. We have web services, and we know that web service clients are probably connecting over HTTP and probably over TLS 1.0 as well. There are also customers with custom domains. So they connect, or they brand their surveys with their own domain and connect it, or point that to our IP. And so the main thing here is mixed content. So I created a demo survey to explain to people, mostly, or first internally and then externally, what mixed content means. So this is a page that has passive mixed content, also called display mixed content. As you can see, it's loaded over HTTPS, but it loads an image over HTTP, which means if somebody is snooping on the connection, they won't see the page. The only thing they will see is the domain you requested. Everything else will be encrypted. But they will be able to see this image because this image is loaded over HTTP. So the browsers are warning about this by removing the padlock. So there is no padlock here. So in this survey, you can then click the button, the next button, to go to the next page, where we have active mixed content, which is a lot worse. Because if you load certain types of content over HTTP, it can be manipulated. And that could be a lot worse. Because then you could have a lot more evil scripts and going into iframes or into script code or even in CSS. So on this page, still loads over HTTPS. So we get the padlock. There's even extended validation certificate. On this page, we load a JavaScript file over HTTP. And what happens is that all the browsers will block this. So you're not even allowed to download this file. And you're notified in Chrome with this little symbol up here. Has anyone seen this symbol? So you have noticed it. Did you understand what it meant? So it actually is understandable. I actually didn't notice this until I was making this presentation. What you can see is in developer tools. You can get a line in the console log. Actually, all the desktop browsers will show you this, but it's not visible until you go look for it. And what happened in this survey is that not only couldn't we load this JavaScript file, it also broke some other scripts, which meant there is no watermark logo down here, and there is no forward button or back button. So all the buttons are gone, which means survey respondents will be stuck on this page, and they can't complete the survey and respond to all the other questions, which is really bad for those who have that survey out. And mixed content is displayed slightly differently in the various browsers. So passive mixed content is shown pretty much like HTTP. Active mixed content may or may not have some symbol. Of course, Internet Explorer has the huge pop-up down on the bottom, and they allow you to click a button to go insecure if you want to. So we knew that there was a lot of mixed content in the client or customer documents, but we didn't know how much, and we didn't really know what to do about the problem. So there were several meetings, and a lot of ideas came up, but there were never any conclusions because it's a hard problem. And one of the solutions that came up was to proxy all the HTTP content. We were in control of the presentation of the documents, so we could actually do this, but we would have to develop something. It would cost bandwidth. It would add latency. There may even be legal issues to this. And we wouldn't really be fixing the problem because our customers would keep reintroducing HTTP references. We could set up a content delivery network. We'd still have to move everything over there. Then there's the interesting case of some of our customers have their own customers who have a requirement that content is loaded from their server, which may not have HTTPS. And also here, we're not really fixing the problem. And another option was to, of course, to just go cold turkey, just set a date and say to customers, good luck. You have to go fix this. And that's not really easy. I saw one survey, which is probably long-running and reused because it was huge. It had almost 12,000 references to HTTP. And our documents aren't like Word files where you can just go search replace. You have to click around a lot. And that would require a lot of man-hours to fix, a lot of boring man-hours. And some of our customers have a lot of documents that would have to be fixed. Another option or idea that came up was to use protocol relative. If you haven't heard of that, it's when you don't write HTTP : // but just //. And the resource will load over the same scheme as the page itself. So HTTP means that this resource loads over HTTP, and HTTPS, you load it over HTTPS. Today, this is seen as an anti-pattern. And in many cases, this would break even harder than mixed content. Because, well, if it isn't available on HTTPS, the content would just be gone. So the script wouldn't run because it couldn't be loaded. Images would be gone. And then the last option wasn't really kind of an option in these meetings because we looked for an easy solution. The last option was to provide some tools and set a date. And if we could make a tool to locate HTTP references, we could maybe classify them and offer some easy fixes. And this is, of course, cool because for us developers, this is a development task. And we like that, and it's interesting. We're building something new. And I started out in our personal development time. So every Friday after lunch, we have set aside time for personal development. So I spent a few Fridays on just building a proof of concept solution to see, can we go through a document structure and locate all the HTTP references and then classify them? But then after a while, I realized this is not a development task, because it will eventually involve the entire, or pretty much the entire organization. Maybe not everything, but a substantial amount of it. The ops team, or software as a service team, as we call them, they will have to do some scanning, they will have to check the logs, and they will have to do a lot of other things. The tech support will have to answer a lot of questions. R&D will, of course, have to make it. Product management will have to prioritize it and communicate to the customers. Sales may have to handle some angry customers, and services will have to fix things they've made for ourselves and for others. But it doesn't end there. Most of our customers would have to do something. So it's not just making a tool, it actually involves a lot of people, thousands of people, really. So what are we really talking about? It's the confirm it documents are the surveys, and reports, layouts, and templates. And these are all in tree structures. As I said, we have to click around to find all the references. A lot of it is HTML. And you can have inline scripting and inline CSS in the HTML. You can also have separate files with JavaScript and CSS. And there can be URLs and in different properties. And you could link some of these things together so the survey could have a layout, and that would also come into question. And then we'd be looking for references in the documents. So in HTML, this would be tags like this, where there's a URL, mostly in the source attribute. And they could also be in script and in style sheets, of course, and in properties. What you see here is, on top, those that would cause passive mixed content. On the bottom, those that would cause active mixed content. And we'd have to distinguish between these two. But we need to look for them. We need to find this. This is what we did in the scanner. So to find them, your friend is, of course, regexp. If you love regexp, I would guess you would like to see this. If you hate it, you can think of a better way. So first, we'd have to build regexp to filter out all the comments, because there are a lot of URLs in comments, and we really don't need those, like things that are no longer active. That's filtered away, and then we need to filter away script and CSS and treat that differently. And then we're left with the kind of the raw HTML. And this regexp here will look for any tag with the source attribute. And then it gets complicated, because the URL that comes after the source and an equal sign may or may not have quotes around it. And we even have some proprietary scripting that has single quotes, and then you'll have double quotes around that. Made it more complicated. Okay, then there is the HTTP://, and then there is something more until the URL ends. So with this, we're actually able to catch all the URLs in each piece of HTML, which left us with a bunch of URLs on HTTP. And then we could start to classify. And so we'd look it up on HTTP and see if it exists. And turns out that in a lot of cases, it surprised me how many times the resource just didn't exist. And I guess it would surprise our customers too, to find out that the resources that they've been referencing for maybe a long time just isn't there. And now they would know. Okay, so that's kind of the bad case. Better case is when it's found. So when it's found on HTTP, we'll go look for it on HTTPS. There is a variety of this where we don't look it up on HTTP because we get a redirect directly to HTTPS. And there is another variety on that as well, where the redirect goes somewhere else. So it goes to some other site, or it's another path. But now we're ready to look it up on HTTPS and see what we can find there. And the happy case is that we find the same file as we found on HTTP, or we find the file after following the redirect. But I dotted this arrow going from HTTPS on another domain or path, because sometimes you are redirected to a page not found page or something like that, and you don't really want to change the reference to something that isn't the original resource. But what also happens in a lot of cases is that there's a handshake failure, which means TLS is not configured, or in simple terms, there is no HTTPS. Of course, then you can't do much directly just updating the reference. You'll have to do something else. Sometimes you find a certificate. It's configured. There is HTTPS, but the certificate isn't trusted. And if it's a resource on the page, most of the time the browsers won't care. But you may want to do something differently if the certificate isn't, or if the certificate isn't trusted. You may, in some cases, find a different file. I didn't see it much, but it did happen. And you may not want to link or update the reference to a file that's different. This most likely happens when there are dynamic pages. Another thing that could happen, I don't ever know if it even happened, but it may happen. You get another redirect, or you get some error, and then we don't really know what to do. So that's not the end, because we can still do something. If there is no HTTPS, we can look in the confirm it CDN. There's a content delivery network where the customers can upload files. And we will go there and look to see if there is a matching file that has the same file name and maybe also the same, and well, does it also have the same content? If it has the same file name and same content, well, it's the same file. That's another option to go and reference it there. And if it isn't there, but it's of the allowed type, then you can upload it. I'm getting cropped here. Okay. The same thing we can also do when the certificate isn't trusted. So we built this classification system, and that was an interesting journey. We learned a lot of things. One thing we learned is to go head first. Because you just do a head request, not a get request. Because you don't actually need the resource at first, you just need to see if it's there. And it's much faster to just get the response header with the content length. But we're, of course, interacting with thousands of different servers hosting all this content. And a lot of things could go wrong and did go wrong. Some of them weren't supporting the head request, of course, so we had to revert to get. And then we had to set the timeout value, because some of them just didn't time out. And the scanner would be very slow if we didn't time out quickly. And then there were things like surveys that as I told you about, had almost 12,000 references. 2,000 of them were unique. Of course, we had to optimize to only check unique references. That took 30 minutes to scan, so it had to give output before we reached the timeout value. There was even one server that required a user agent string, so we had to fix that, and we deployed it. And when we verified it, it no longer required the user agent string, of course, but other servers might do. Then there was also a case of missing CRLF in chunked response. This, of course, only happened on every other request. They probably had 2 servers, one with this problem. And took us some time to find out what the issue really was. So with this classification that I just showed you, we can then show or order all the references into different buckets. One bucket is all the references that are available on HTTP and HTTPS. This is a really simple case because you can just add the S. And we added a button for that, so they would get to see all the references, and they could click one button, fix all of these. It's kind of simple. They saves them all the work, just click one button. And they could choose to, if they want to do the same with the files with certificate problems, because they could choose to fix the server first and then rescan and see if that would help. Another quite easy case is when there is a redirect to somewhere else. Also for that, we had the one-button approach. So just click the button, and that would fix it. And you could choose if you wanted to include certificate problems, and if you would want to include files where the file name or the query string changed. Because as I said, that may take you to somewhere completely different. And next one, it's only on HTTP, but it exists in the confirmed CDN. So if you have a lot of reports or surveys that all use your company logo on HTTP, you could upload it once, and then everyone could reference the same file. And you could do this with clicking the one button. And if you didn't want to click all the 3 buttons here, there was a click all of the above buttons. So that would fix everything, all of these 3 categories at once. Next category is, it's on HTTP, but you can upload it to the CDN. You can't do that for all file types. And if you clicked one button again, that would upload the file and reference it there, change the references. And of course, you can choose what you want to do with the certificate problems. But then the final category, we can't really do anything because we don't know what to do. But for things that was in this category, and for all the other categories, we would give you a list of all the references, all the usages of them, and you could go directly into the document and see the context and change it yourself. So this was the scanner we built for the users, because the users would need to get all the details and to know what they needed to do. So that was one of the scanners we built. But we also built some other scanners where we didn't need the classification and to know all the actions. We just needed to know, is there mixed content and is there active mixed content? So that was a lot simpler. We just looked at the types of tags, and that was it. It was much faster because we didn't have to look up thousands of resources. And with that, we built like a bulk scanner that the ops team would run. Just every week, we would just scan all the documents that have been modified since last time. And we also added a scan when the documents are published. So when you take the design version and make a published version, the runtime version, there will be a scanner running. It will warn you if there is active mixed content. And quite soon, it will throw an error and just abort the whole publish if there is active mixed content. And what we found was that there were almost 200,000 documents that were scanned, and these had been active within the last year, or were still in use, or were created recently. So we had some rules on what do we really need to scan, because there are some really old documents that we really don't care about. And a third of them, at least 66,000, had mixed content and should really do something. And here I say 43,000 had active mixed content. That's an overstatement, because there are a lot of false positives. Everything in a script will be marked as active mixed content, because we can't really tell how it's going to be used. Because it may be mixed content, and the consequence of a false negative is much higher than a false positive, and therefore we just mark it as active mixed content. So that was the main thing that we had to work on, and our customers are working on this right now. When I go in, I can check, has there been any scans last 5 minutes? And, well, people are scanning. They're scanning a lot. And it seems that these numbers are also going down, sometimes going up when we bulk scan everything, but then they keep going down because our customers are working on this. But there were also some other issues to make us ready for HTTPS. One was custom domains. So some customers don't want to use the confirm it domain for the service. They want to brand this. And if they set up a domain and point it to our IP address, it's branded for them. But that only works on HTTP. When we start redirecting to HTTPS, they will at least, that probably won't work. Or at the best, they will get a certificate warning. That's probably what they will get. And we only knew about those that have already provided us with the TLS certificate, because they wanted to have HTTPS previously. So we need to communicate to all of them, and we also need to ask them if they need to support Windows XP, because that would make us change the configuration a bit. So we'd have to look through the logs and see what are all these domains that people are requesting our service over. And then web services. So the web service clients, some of them have been running for years and years and years. And we have been allowing HTTP. So some of them are probably connecting over HTTP, and when we looked in the logs, a lot of them were. Too bad. So they've all been told to fix that. And then we also wanted to know if they're using TLS 1.0 and 1.1, because we want to phase out that as well. And that is harder to find out. So it turned out we actually had to set up the load balancers to add some information that we could then log to find out which protocol they're on. And then we'll have to communicate that as well, and hopefully they will fix it, and if they don't, it will stop working. But as I said, there was some other mixed content. And this other mixed content, it wasn't feasible to build a scanner, because it wasn't very much of it, or because the content was on some other servers, because there's a way that our customers can take some content from somewhere else and put it as fragments into surveys. And as we didn't even know where it was really hard to scan it, so scanner was out of the question. So what can we do? And another question is, can we find it before it becomes mixed content and before users start to report it? And we found a solution for this, and if a scanner isn't what you need, this may actually be useful for a lot of you if you think about, or if you're in the process of making things HTTPS only. And first I'll just tell you about content security policy because it relates very much to that. This is a security header. It's very useful. So, it's one of the best things, I think, in security, and a lot of more sites should use it. So this is a response header. It can do a lot of different things, but the main thing it does is that you can whitelist sources for different types of content. And if you specify, for instance, where scripts can be loaded from, you whitelist those scripts, and every script that isn't loaded from that server or from that location will be blocked by the browser. So the browser will just block everything that isn't whitelisted. And you can also make the browser send a report for things that are blocked. What's also interesting here that we could have used is upgrade insecure requests, which is a directive in CSP. With this, you can change all resources from HTTP to HTTPS. And now this is supported in most browsers. It wasn't recently. So that's the CSP, but we're not using CSP. We're using something very similar. So it's the content security policy report only. So it's the CSP, but in report only mode. So it doesn't block as content security policy does, but it sends a report as if it would be blocked. So this is what you can enable before you enable content security policy, just to see if something will break. We didn't want to see if things would break. We would see what will cause mixed content. So I configured the content security policy report only, like you can see in blue. So I've defined sources for image, for script, for media, and for font. And there I say that, well, they can be loaded from self, which is this server that you loaded the page over. And the reason for adding this is, of course, relative links. You need to support all of those because even though the page is still in HTTP, relative links will load on HTTP, but as you convert to HTTPS, they will load over HTTPS as well. So the same server is whitelisted. And we also whitelist HTTPS, of course, because we're interested in blacklisting HTTP. And then I also added a few other things here, like data and blob, because they're not loaded as separate resources. And for script, also unsafe inline and unsafe eval, because that's about script execution and not about loading resources. And then I set up the report URI to send a report. And there is a very neat service for this, report URI. It's created by Scott Helm, and he even presented about it on Wednesday. So you can send all the reports there, or you can set up an endpoint for yourself. But I suspected that we didn't have that many reports coming in. So I thought this is perhaps the fastest way to set it up. So we set it up on a few servers, not all of them, because I just wanted to check out where do we get, or will we get mixed content. So these are the reports coming in. And we can see that, like in the third column, that's the requested page, that's where we will find where did we request the resource. And then the fifth column is the requested resource, and the fourth column is what type of content. So here we're not doing much, really. I was just configuring this header, and then users did what they did. Their browsers sent the reports. We got them here, and we could fine-tune the header, and then we could notify the customers. So it didn't really take many minutes to get all of this done. It was really quick. As you can see, some of these are already on HTTPS. So they are already causing mixed content, and we're notifying our customers about that. Some of them will be causing mixed content when we're HTTPS only. And we're also notifying our customers in advance. So the users and the browsers did the job for us. A little help from Report URI. So this is really feasible when you need to locate the HTTP references. And this was feasible for us when there was a small amount. If we had all our surveys to go through this, like 10 million page views a day, we would probably be swamped. And it would be hard to kind of map back to all the servers and find out which customer, and they would have to do a lot of job to fix the references. So the scanners was a better choice there, but for some of these things, Report URI and Content Security Policy Report Only was a really good thing to use. So some things are happening quite soon in Confirm It. Just 2.5 weeks from now, our survey designer applications will be HTTPS only. Report design and report viewing will be HTTPS only. And we will throw errors when our customers are publishing their documents with active mixed content. August 6th, we plan to phase out TLS 1.0 and 1.1 for our common infrastructure, and also for the web services. 1st of October, surveys will be HTTPS only, and by that time, all of Confirm It is HTTPS only. And hopefully right after that, we can enable the HTTP strict transport security header, which will cause internal redirect in the browser. And when we get this preloaded, if you ever go to Confirm It site, you will be automatically on HTTPS. Even though you actively request it on HTTP, your browser will tell you you should go on HTTPS. And finally, then we're home. So that was the end of that. We have a tech blog. I published a readable version of this there today. And if you go look on Twitter, there's also a link on the last part with detecting the resources with Content Security Policy Report Only and Report URI. So, thank you. If there are any questions, you may ask them now. Okay, thank you very much.